Our next point is international code for botanical nomenclature. Now we are in today's lecture we are going to discuss about salient features, principle, important rules and recommendations for international code of botanical nomenclature and provision for governance of the code and appendices. Now international code of botanical nomenclature is the important aspect in taxonomic studies because it is all based on the naming of plant or nomenclature of the plant, and this nomenclature is not just an giving the name to any plant, but it is art of naming, and it is science of applications of name. So in nomenclature, we have to think about the plant, we have to think about the characteristics, even we can think about the distribution of the plant species. So there are certain criteria on the basis of that there is a nomenclature to the plants. So it is art of naming and science of applications of name. So firstly, we can name them and then applications to the plant. Now this name may be vernacular, that is local language, then common names and local names, and the names are scientific. Now this scientific nomenclature is for communication at international level. As we know, throughout the world there are different countries and we people are using different languages, but the English is most of the time common language. Even then, some of the countries are not using English as their language. So, as there is no common language throughout the world, since this nomenclature should be in any precise language, and for that, the nomenclature or the names given to the plants or animals even are used in Latin, or most of the times in Latin. Now, why the Latin language is used for nomenclature? Because this language was previously used in European countries, but at this time or in today's era, any of the country, any of the community not using Latin as their primary language or Latin as their language. So, as today no anyone is using this language, this Latin is considered as the language for nomenclature. Because if suppose English language we are using, so this English language is priority of some of the countries. Some of the countries has their the first language English as a first language, and at that time there may be some discrimination. To avoid that discrimination, the Latin language was used. So it is, as it is not used as a primary language or a common language of the country. Earlier this was used in European countries. And the third and important thing was the earlier literature on the plant sciences was in Latin. So there was one more option. Being an Indian, we can think about the Sanskrit, as it is not used, it is not the common language, it is not the primary language of any country. We can use also Sanskrit, but the literature is international literature was in Latin. So the Latin is considered as important language for botanical nomenclature. Now, in nomenclature, there are two components. Today, we know that the in plant naming, the genera or genus and species are used for nomenclature. But earlier, as there was no literature, there is no data about that. So the names they are supplemented with some adjectives. So there is no any base for botanical plant nomenclature before it was decided that there must be genera, there are some rules. So these rules are designed in International Code of Botanical Nomenclature, and before that the names are supplemented with adjective. There may be some descriptive terms. So these are the characteristics of the plant, and so the name is that. Likewise, so descriptive terms were there, multiple terms were there. As there is no common language, no specification in language, so multiple terms were used, and this is called as trivial. Trivial, that means there is no base. So without base, without any specific reason, the names were given. Even in Linnaeus, its description in species planetarium, there was unintentional retrieval. So there was no any base. So just the plant names are given and with any specific reason. And then the concept of botanical nomenclature was introduced, and in that botanical binomial nomenclature, binomial, that is there must be some two names, by two names, and that two names are generic name and specific epithet. Even the generic names are sometimes they are specific, but specific epithet was again trivial. So there is no base. So it is unintentional. Then the generic names again in binomial nomenclature, as there are two components, generic name and specific epithet. The generic name may be name of person, name of botanist, and some features of plant. And in specific epithet, that is to which we called as species, this species name, the species nomenclature is on the basis of habitat, then morphological structure of plant, then on the basis of locality, then on the basis of resemblance. So in India, the species which are named by the researchers from India, most of the time the species are like indica. Alba is also common name in which is used in India. So it has some resemblance with locality, maybe some relationship with some scientists. For example, Siropegia ananthi, the name given by botanist researchers from Shivaji University, Kolhapur. So Siropegia ananthi was the name given to one species. Then it is on the honor of some person. Then there is one species named Sri Rangai. It is also designated to the scientists working in the field. So in specific epithet or in the name of species, uh, these are some considerations. After that, there was some organized nomenclature was introduced, and this was after Linnaeus in species plantarum. So what the concept comes out, that is a definite system of naming a plant. So irrespective of any base or tree level, there must be some system, definite system of classification naming of plant, and this should be convenient in classification or even in identification. So the organized nomenclature was introduced after that time. Now this organized nomenclature was comes after the International Code of Botanical Nomenclature. So this International Code of Botanical Nomenclature, as the name itself suggests, that it is the code for botanical nomenclature. Now this code has designed some rules, and these rules are rules um, mm, are considering it has six principles. There are 75 rules, there are 57 recommendations, and number of notes and example. So what the botanical code, International Code of Botanical Nomenclature consists, it has six principles. So basically the nomenclature is based on these basic principles. There are some appendices also. There are 75 rules and 57 recommendations. Now I will just discuss what is difference between rules, recommendations and principle in my next slide, and it also includes several appendices. So there are three appendix and guide for determination of types and citation. Now first we'll think about the appendix, because the principle and rules are most important. What the appendix includes? So in International Code of Botanical Nomenclature, it includes three appendix. The first one, it gives rules regarding hybrids and some special categories. Rules regarding hybrids and some special categories. Second, the list of conserved names of families. List of conserved names of families. So in that list, some names which are conserved are in that appendix. And third one, list of conserved and rejected generic names. So some names are conserved, some names are conserved, that is the names are preserved, and some are rejected. So rejected names also must be there, so that everyone can know that these names we cannot use, and some names which are conserved, that name also cannot be used repeatedly. So for that, the appendix which includes several names and families. Now we come to the principles. There are 6 principles I have already told. The first one, botanical nomenclature is independent of zoological nomenclature. So there is distinction in plant names and animals names. So there must not be similarity. So they are independent. Botanical names are independent of zoological names. And why this principle is included? Because the species plantarum includes both plants and animals, so it has to be considered. The second component, second principle, names of taxonomy groups are determined by means of nomenclature type. So by when giving the name to the plant, it must include, or it must be consistent with nomenclature type. I am going to discuss about nomenclature type in my next presentation. So is that constituent element of taxon to which name of taxon is permanently attached. Nomenclature of taxonomic group is based on priority of publication. So there is one principle of priority, because sometimes what happens, somebody has published his literature in some journals, in some publications, and he has given some specific name to plant, and some days after, some years after, some other person may also use the same plant, and he may try to give some different name to the plant. So in that case there may be some confusion, as the one plant can be named by two different author, and their names also may be different. So to avoid that, the principle of priority was introduced. And what the principle of priority says, when one scientist, one researchers give a name to any plant species, and after some time maybe another scientist, another researcher give different name to the same plant, in that case the principle of priority states that the name which was first designated should be considered, should be used. So as an example, uh, Lawsonia inermis, it was named in 1753, and the same species, same individual, same plant was named as Lawsonia alba. So by Linnaeus it was named as Lawsonia inermis, and Lamarck gives the name as Lawsonia alba. So Linnaeus named this plant in 1753, and Lamarck gave the name to the plant in 1789. So in that case, the first name, the principle of priority states that the first name which was given earlier in 1753 should be preserved. So this is what is principle of priority. Then each taxonomic group with particular circumscription, position and rank can bear only one correct name. Now what is that? One name must be given to the plant, so there must not be repeated name. So sometimes the different situations are there, and depending on the situation, that is circumscription, then position and rank, there may be different names will be given, and that names should not be considered. Rather there is some condition that when the name first published or given to the plant species, that data or that name must be published in botanical literature, printed matter, in printed form, in botanical institutions, libraries, or must accompanied with description of taxon or reference to previous description. What is that? When one think about to give name to the plant, he has to publish that data, that description of the plant, along with the generic and specific name, and that data must be published in botanical literature of botanical institutions. So suppose I think I have to give some name to the plant species, and I have collected the plant and I given the plant my name, and I have published this in daily newspaper. So it is not valid. So I have to prepare a scientific draft, and that draft must be published by botanical institutions like Kew Botanical Garden. So Q publications. So in that case, this one only valid, and also it should be supported with Latin diagnosis. And this condition was introduced after 1st January 1958. The next principle is the scientific name of taxonomic group are treated as Latin regardless of their derivation. So whatever be the country of publication, whatever be the author of publication, the name must be in Latin. And rules of nomenclature are retroactive unless expressly limited. So these rules are applicable to all. That it does not mean that now these rules are published and these rules are applicable from this today only. So these rules are expressed limitedly, apply to work done before the acceptance of these rules also. So these are the 6 basic principles. I just repeat. Botanical nomenclature is independent of zoological nomenclature. Names of taxonomic group are determined by means of nomenclature type. Nomenclature of taxonomic group is based on priority of publication, that is principle of priority. Each taxonomic group with a particular circumscription, position and rank can bear only one correct name. And the last one, next one, the scientific names of taxonomic groups are treated as Latin regardless of their derivation, and the rules of nomenclature are retroactive unless expressly limited. Now the next one, rules and recommendation. So these ICBN rules are adopted in Paris in 1868, and there are some improvements in Vienna in 1905 and Brussels in 1910. Now these rules and recommendation or ICBN rules are divided in, I just discussed, that is principle, rules and recommendations. Now what are the principles? These principles are foundations for rules and recommendations. So rules or recommendations are made on the basis of principle. Rules are the norms and forms of nomenclature. What are the specific norms for nomenclature that are included in rules and in recommendations? Secondary points. That is, firstly we have to follow the principle. So these are 6 basic principles. On the basis of that we can go give nomenclature. There are some rules supporting the principle. So each of the principle will be supported by some rules. So these are the norms and recommendation. The rules are again further supported with the recommendations. So recommendations are secondary points in botanical nomenclature. Now I'll just see some of the rules, as there are several 75 rules. Some of them I have just pointed here. Rules and recommendations in that. The first one, all those plants which belong to one genus must be designated by the source generic name. So one genus is must be designed, and all the material, all the plant species from this genre with the same name. All those plants which belong to different genera must be designated by different generic names. He who establish a new genus should give it a name. So whenever any researcher find out any new species and he think that this is the new species, at that time he has to give some name to the plant or name to the species. Those generic names are best which show essential characters of plant and its appearance. So as I just stated, in generic name the rule is that it should have some essential characters of plant and on the basis of their appearance. Generic names 1.5 foot long or difficult to pronounce or unpleasant are to be avoided. So generic name should be pleasant, generic name should be short. So half foot long, it is too much lengthy name, and in that case that name should not be considered or should be avoided. The scientific name must be distinguish a plant from all its relatives. This name should not be should show some resemblance with the relatives. Size does not distinguish species. So size of plant is one parameter that should not be important parameter during the description of plant. Original place of plant does not give specific differences. So this place we should consider in a name of species, not in a genera. The generic name must be applied to each species. A scientific name should always follow the generic name. So, as these rules are regarding the scientific name, the rules are for giving the scientific names to the plant. So, this must follow the generic name. So, this is all about the rules of ICBN. Thank you.